Hey everyone, and welcome to the Language Arts Gallery. Today we're going to continue with Lesson 7 in our academic writing course, and we're going to be talking about outlining our research article. So today we're going to review the 3 moves in cars. We're going to talk about developing a working thesis statement. We're going to talk about the structure and the content of academic outlines. And finally, we're going to finish up with a skills lab where we're going to talk about sentence fragments and run-on sentences and how we can correct them. So hopefully you all remember what CARS stands for. CARS stands for creating a research space. And there are 3 moves in CARS. We said that we want to establish the territory. Remember, we talked about this notion of creating centrality, where we're communicating to our audience that this topic is of central importance. We're establishing a niche. So we're talking about what research has been done, but we're also talking about what's relatively unexplored. And then finally, we want to occupy that niche. So we want to say, this has been done, this remains to be studied, and now you're going to step into that niche and you're going to talk about what you're studying. So, in which of these moves are you communicating your thesis? The third one, where you're occupying your niche. So people write outlines for a variety of reasons. You may be asked to write an outline for your professor. When I was a doctoral student, when I was doing my literature review, I had to write an alphanumeric outline to submit to my professor. And the reason I had to do that was because my professor wanted to make sure that my literature review was funneling down. So they wanted to see that I was starting with these broad topics and I was working to something that was more clearly defined. But if you're not writing for your professor, if you're just writing for yourself, the most important thing about an outline is it should help you to write more effectively. Beyond that, it's a great way to organize your ideas. It's really great because it's good for showing the relationship between your ideas and establishing a logical flow to your paper. And many of my students like to start by outlining. Even before they start brainstorming ideas, they like to get a general structure of where their paper's going. And that's fine. So unless you're writing for a professor, the most important thing is that it should help you. So where do we begin? Well, first we want to establish our purpose for writing. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this, whether we're writing a research article or we're writing a persuasive essay or an academic essay. We want to figure out who our audience is, and that's going to depend also on our purpose for writing. And we want to talk about our thesis. Now, our thesis at this point may not be set in stone, and that's okay. We talked in our last video, we said that working through the research process and working through the process of reading articles on the field that we're interested in, it's a bit of a messy process, and that's okay if we go back and we have to refine our thesis statement. So that's going to change, but more on that in just a bit. So we want to start by establishing our purpose, right? So what type of writing are we doing? So I talked about this in our very first video, and that's because this is very, very important because it's going to impact your thesis statement. So let's take a look at these 2 thesis statements here. This paper examines how urban design influences physical activity in public spaces. It's very different from this next thesis statement, which says, urban design must prioritize walkability to improve public health and reduce emissions. So the author is doing different types of writing here. That first thesis statement, we're likely to find this in a research article. It's neutral and it's informative. And the second thesis statement, we're more likely to find this in an academic essay. It's more persuasive and it's very powerful. So once we've established our purpose, we want to think about who our audience is. Okay, so your audience is going to be impacted by your purpose. If you're writing a research article, who do you think is your audience? Well, your peers, right? The academic discourse community. And if you're writing a persuasive essay, well, it depends, right? It really depends. This is where you have to really make some decisions about who you're writing for. Because if you're writing a persuasive essay, who your audience is, that's going to impact your tone. It's going to impact how powerfully you try to communicate that argument. Okay, so since in this class we're focused on academic research, our thesis is going to be purpose driven because our audience is going to be the academic discourse community. So I want to back up just a moment here. I want to take a look here at some different styles of thesis statements here. This study measures the impact of social media platforms have on adolescent sleep patterns and mental health. This is a great example of a research thesis. The second one, the government should ban single-use plastics to protect marine ecosystems. Well, that is clearly persuasive. Okay. The next one, this article surveys the ways in which access to higher education increases economic mobility for low-income individuals. Again, that's research oriented, right? Remember, research starts with a question. So when we look at these research thesis statements here, we're writing for that academic discourse community. We're not coming in, we're not being very bossy and very authoritative, right? We do want to be somewhat authoritative and we want to be taken seriously, but we don't want to be so overwhelming that we're trying to persuade these people. We're simply doing research, we're getting data, we're interpreting the data, right? And then we're communicating our findings. So you have a very different approach to the two types of thesis statements that that you could communicate depending on the genre of your writing. So then we want to talk about starting with a working thesis statement. And remember, I said this can change because it is a bit of a messy process, right? So here we've got our working thesis. This study explores the role of peer interaction in the academic writing process. All right, it's okay. We're getting there. But we want to further refine this. And eventually we're going to come to a more polished thesis statement as we read more. And this is an example here. This study examines how peer interaction shapes writing practices among multilingual doctoral students, focusing on revision strategies and writing confidence. I think that's a really great thesis statement. So, in my Teachers Pay Teacher store, you can find this resource, okay? And it comes with this opportunity for you to work through an academic outline. And you're going to start with your purpose, your audience, and then establish your working thesis. Remember, this is going to be the map for your research paper. And to my students in Ethiopia, of course, if you need anything, don't purchase it. Just reach out to me and I'll provide that for you. Okay, so now let's talk about two different types of outlines. Okay, so there are going to be two basic defining characteristics to our academic outline, which is our content and our structure. Okay, so let's start with the content of our outlines. We can talk about topic outlines or we can talk about full sentence outlines. And they're pretty self-explanatory based on the titles. The topic outline, we're simply going to write topics, the names of topics. We're going to rely on short phrases and keywords. So we might start with the causes of urban migration. Whereas sentence outlines, we're going to use full sentences, complete sentences. One cause of urban migration is the decline of rural job opportunities. So, looking at those two types of outlines, which do you think would be most helpful when writing a research paper and why? Now, remember what I said at the beginning of this video. It's what helps you to write more effectively. One strategy that I think is really great is you can start with a topic outline and then you can rewrite it as a full sentence outline. Why? Well, topic outlines are great for getting your ideas down. They're great for establishing a general flow. For example, I talked about doing an outline of a literature review. That's a really great example of where you might want to do a topic outline because you're starting with something that's really broad and then you're funneling it down. So you're just worried about topics, right? But sentence outlines tend to be very useful for establishing a logical flow to your paper, and they may be more useful when you go back and use them to write. So now let's look at the structure of an outline. And when we talk about the structure of an outline, this is really simple. Think about the structure of the chapters in your dissertation or the sections of a research article. So based on that, this is what your outline might look like. You've got your introduction. And when you're writing your or you're outlining your introduction, do that with the car's moves in mind, right? Think about establishing your territory, establishing your niche, and occupying that niche. When you get to your lit review, this is where you're talking about what's been done before, and you want to funnel down to that gap in the research. And remember, if you're writing a research article, your lit review is going to be very brief, right? Whereas if you're writing a dissertation, it's going to be far lengthier. When you get to the methods section, you're going to describe your approach, data collection, analysis, and we're going to look at a model of that. Your results, you may have this, you may not, right? And this will determine where you go with the rest of your outline. Obviously, it's going to be very difficult to discuss your results if you don't have them. But if you do already have your results, all you're really doing in your results section is you're communicating what your data says. And what is your data saying? You're going to go through each research question. Then you're going to go to your discussion, and hopefully you're connecting this back to your literature review. And when you get to your conclusion, you're going to talk about the contributions of your study, any limitations, and the direction that future scholars can take. So remember, I said how you choose to outline it's up to you. It's what helps you to write best. We've got the alphanumeric approach where we're starting with Roman numerals, and we're going to look at examples of these where we've got then after our Roman numerals, so number one would be our introduction. Then we're going to move to our capital letter A, and that's where we're going to start talking about establishing territory. Underneath that capital letter is an Arabic numeral. And then that's like a subtopic, and then a subtopic under the Arabic numerals is going to be lowercase letters. And then there are decimal outlines where the overarching topic will start with 1.0, subtopics will add a decimal point, 1.1, 1.2, and subtopics under those, we add another decimal point. This is the most common type, but again, it's whatever works best for you or whatever your professor requires. So here we've got a model outline of an introduction. So I think this is pretty good. It does a pretty good job of moving us through the CARS model. We've got our letter A. Multilingual doctoral students often face challenges in developing academic writing confidence. And we've got two Arabic numerals under that, talking about struggling with disciplinary conventions and audience awareness, and the differences in institutional support. So they're establishing the territory there. And as we move into B and C, they're talking about prior research here. And we're talking about the niche. I think there are a few things that we could do better, and we're going to talk about that when we look at the lit review. And finally, with letter D, they're occupying that niche. So I would add something more about the gap in the research. They really talk more about that in the lit review, but I would mention it in the introduction too. So let's take a look here at the literature review. This is our second Roman numeral because this is our second big part of our paper. And they're starting here the value of peer feedback in writing, gaps in the current research. Now, in your literature review, I do think you want to go further and go deeper with where these gaps exist. But I do think that that should be mentioned in the introduction. You want to establish that gap, and then you're going to talk more about it in the lit review. Those two sections really should link up. Uh, so I do think there's a logical flow here, and do bear in mind that this is a very brief outline. If you were outlining the literature review for your dissertation, it's going to be many, many pages. Uh, I would start far more broadly. The value of peer feedback in writing, to me, it's too focused. I want the writer to start with something broader. Talk to me about academic writing first, right? And then you want to narrow that, right? So let's talk about, okay, academic writing, um, perhaps academic writing at the university level, academic writing at the doctoral level, then perhaps we're talking about strategies to improve writing at the doctoral level, and then we're focusing specifically on peer feedback. Since this is really talking about struggles, I would maybe even start with struggles that multilingual learners face with academic writing, struggles in K to 12, struggles at university, struggles in doctoral writing. So I think we've got to really start broad and then funnel down. So I don't think this outline does a very good job of funneling down. So this is an opportunity if you want to pause the video and work through this. You can work on what is a very flawed outline and try to further develop this into a more comprehensive outline. So if you want to, you can also work through a simple introduction for your research. Remember, you want to keep the CARS model in mind. You want to establish your territory, establish that niche or that gap in the research, and then occupy that gap. Okay, so let's take a look at the methods section here. Okay, and I'm going to move myself over here. So I think this is good. The first big letter here, the letter A, is talking about research design, and they're talking about a mixed methods approach. They talk about the participants. One thing I would add here, there's not a lot of information on the population and sampling, so I might add that in. Data collection procedures. I think that's pretty good. Data analysis, I might quantitative survey were analyzed using descriptive statistics and regression analysis. Uh, I might include something like InJASP or SPSS or whatever software they're using. They do mention that for the qualitative aspects, they talk about using in vivo. And then finally, the ethical considerations. So that's something that I would add in there, something on sampling. But overall, I think this is a pretty good outline of a method section. And that's going to be pretty consistent. I think the method section is pretty easy to write. So again, if you want to, you can pause the video and work through this method section, which is obviously got a lot of shortcomings, and you can try to further develop this. So let's finish up with our skills lab on sentence fragments and run-on. So a fragment is an incomplete sentence. It's perhaps missing a subject or a verb, or it's just not a complete thought. So here we've got, because the study was inconclusive, obviously this is not a complete thought. Run-on sentences occur when two or more independent clauses are joined incorrectly. And a comma splice is when they're joined by a comma, but there's no coordinating conjunction. This study examined writing habits. It also explored revision strategies. And the second sentence, we've got a comma splice. It says, the results were surprising. The literature did not predict them. So we won't go through all of these, but we'll work through a few of these sentences here. Because the researcher conducted only one trial. So obviously, this is not a complete thought. So I might say the results were not conclusive because the researcher conducted only one trial. The data were significant. They revealed a new trend. So I need to put a comma after significant. The data were significant, comma, and they revealed a new trend. Or I could break that up into two sentences. The data were significant, period. They revealed a new trend. When participants arrived, they completed a short survey. Uh, when participants arrived, comma, they completed a short survey. The sample was small, period, which limited generalizability. So the sample was small, comma, which limited generalizability. The study explored peer feedback. It was found to improve clarity. I would say the study explored peer feedback, comma, and it was found to improve clarity. So if you want to, you can pause the video and work through the rest of those. Uh, and again, if you haven't already, please remember to like, subscribe, and comment on my video. And you can find this lesson and all my academic writing lessons in my Teachers Pay Teachers store, which is linked in the video description. So thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you in our next video at the Language Arts Gallery.